Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the season of Moon Knight, mainly the season finale of Moon Knight, which has just been released tonight, and I am so excited to talk about this show because it is definitely my second favorite MCU show up until this point. And later this weekend, of course, I will have reviews out for Multiverse of Madness, and I will probably go ahead and do a ranking of all things MCU, going from Iron Man, including all the shows and movies, up until Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So stay tuned on the channel just for that and subscribe to hear more of these things. And let's just jump into spoilers for the season finale because there's a lot to talk about. A lot of things happened in this episode and this season in general, and I'll mainly be focusing on the finale, like I said, so let's just go ahead and jump right into this. Unfortunately, I did not do weekly reviews for this, but I'll do some overall general thoughts on the season. And first of all, Oscar Isaac is a revelation in this show. I've always liked him as an actor. I really liked him as Poe Dameron, and of course the Star Wars sequel trilogy and a bunch of other things that I've seen him in, but this is definitely my favorite performance of his. He is phenomenal in this show, and just the way that he bounces between these personalities is just so seamless at times. It is just so perfect. Actually, not at times, at all times that he's bouncing between this, especially in this season finale. He really got to flex his acting muscles in this episode because he's going in the same sentence, switching back and forth between Marc and Steven, and even possibly Jake Lockley towards the end of the episode. You see a little bit of a New York accent coming in a little bit at the end there. And then, of course, you get the after credit scene with Jake Lockley, but we'll get into that in a minute. But just the bouncing between Marc and Steven with his performance in this show is incredible. And I love the afterlife world that they have created, this duat that they have that is based on real Egyptian mythology, and they have, you know, them separated in these scenes, and the way that they just so perfectly meld these two performances by the same one actor and make it seem seamless, where it really does feel like you have Steven and Marc in the same exact room. It's not some, you know, movie magic wizardry that they're doing. It is truly incredible. I think it helped that, of course, Oscar Isaac's brother was playing the double in those scenes, but it just really, it's kind of impressive how seamless it is. If you guys don't know filmmaking in general, how hard that is incredibly difficult for eyeline and for just performance and to be able to bounce off the other actor, and somehow he manages to do it. Another performance that I need to praise in this episode and just the season in general is Maya Calamity as LAYLA in this show, and she is also incredible in this. And I love that she got her, I think, the Red Scarab powers. She is now the avatar of TAWARET, which was the hippopotamus that was unveiled in the last episode. The last couple episodes, we got to see her kind of, you know, fun personality that we saw in the last episode and carrying on onto this episode, and seeing that Maya Calamity is also bouncing between her performance as this hippo character and as LAYLA talking to herself in that scene. That was also a lot of fun to see, and seeing her as a superhero. I believe it's the Red Scare because, you know, her name is kind of pulling from the original character who played him in the comics, or who was him in the comics, and now it's played by, you know, a female character. And I love how they just kind of took the aspects of these two different characters in the comics, the normal love interest of Moon Knight and now this Red Scarab character, and kind of blended it into one. And they really did a great job at adapting this comic, because I'm not an expert, I have not read the comic, but from what I hear and from the videos that I've seen, it really does seem like they took the best aspects of this character and they kind of changed it enough to make it really authentic. And of course, Kevin Feige gets a lot of credit for this authenticity, but of course I have to give the most credit to Jeremy Slater being the creator of the show, and of course Mohamed Diab for directing a large majority of these episodes, including the finale. He is a phenomenal director, and I cannot wait to see him hopefully do season 2 of Moon Knight, or a movie for Moon Knight, whatever he ends up doing in the MCU. I want to see his independent films that he's done before this point, because he does such a great job at directing these episodes, along with Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who I love them as directors. I actually have their review out for their new upcoming movie, Something in the Dirt, that I watched at Sundance, and that was definitely an interesting watch. I love them as filmmakers. They're a very interesting duo, and I heard that they're going to be doing Loki season 2, which gets me very excited because I did really like those episodes of this show that they directed. But again, Mohamed Diab gets all the credit in the world. He did a phenomenal job directing this season finale, and I will say that the choreography and the action sequences, although sparing throughout the season, especially in this final episode, was so well done. The action sequences, the stuff that we've been waiting for, that a lot of people had been waiting for the show to do, all the Moon Knight stuff that you want to see, it is in this episode. And it's not like a WandaVision type thing where the finale ends up being like a CGI battle that is not as important or integral to the characters as, you know, the rest of the show had been so, you know, ingrained with grief and this character arc for Wanda and Vision. This show it felt so earned because, again, you had all this development with Marc and Steven throughout the entire show, and especially the last episode dealing with the history of how Steven was created and how Marc had kind of, used him as a coping mechanism because of the abuse he had from his mother, and seeing them work together, him accepting essentially his own split mind in the afterlife when he's finally accepting himself essentially. I loved that moment. It made them fighting together and bouncing between Marc and Steven and Moon Knight and Mr. Knight in this final battle. So entertaining to watch it. Again, the choreography and the camera work in this show. My God, the camera work. I love cinematography. I'm a cinematographer myself. I absolutely love the visual style of this show. And yes, I know people complain about the CGI, especially in the first few episodes of the show. I quite frankly don't really care too much about bad CGI unless it's like it's the only thing that I have. It's so distracting because I'm not invested into the story. I've been invested into the story this entire time, and I think all the budget for that CGI went into these last two episodes. One for TAWARET and that, hippo design. I think she looks phenomenal in both these episodes. And of course, you get Ammit being unleashed in this episode, and you get to see this giant crocodile monster essentially just wreaking havoc in Egypt, fighting a giant Khonshu. That was just absolutely insane. I loved just the visuals of this. I think it looked great for one in terms of the CGI, but just the scale of them and how slow they moved in terms of like punching. You felt the weight of this fight up in the air, and you felt the quickness and the slickness of the fights down on the ground between Moon Knight and of course Arthur Harrow, played by Ethan Hawke, who again, I have to praise more performances in this. Ethan Hawke has been great, and also his dual roles. Everybody pretty much is playing multiple characters in the show, and so he's playing, Dr. Harrow in the mind of Marc Spector, and of course he's playing his normal, Arthur Harrow on Earth, this guy who's trying to unleash Ammit. And one great thing about his character that I really appreciated in this show was, he was a villain that was just so set on unleashing Ammit, and he did a very good job at doing so. He was able to manipulate all these gods in the temple or in the Pyramid of Giza, and he did all that in episode 2 or 3 or 4, whichever one it was. But he was able to do all that and unleashed Ammit, and once Ammit was unleashed, he bowed down and said that his scales were still unbalanced, and he said, I don't care if you take my soul. If anything, I'd rather you take my soul if I'm unbalanced, because this is the path that I've chosen. I just so appreciate the dedication this guy had in terms of being a villain. It makes him very endearing to see him bow down to, the goal that he had, tried to get this entire time, and to try to sacrifice himself for this cause. It made you really appreciate how well written he was as a villain. And in terms of the inside his head stuff as Dr. Harrow, honestly, I think I preferred that version of Harrow more than the actual Arthur Harrow, because he was so great at playing this therapist for Marc Spector and dealing with Marc and Steven, especially in this episode, in the small amounts of time that he was in this episode. And when it went back to the hospital, I was like, I swear, if they're doing like the whole thing was in his head thing, I was like, don't do this to me right now. And of course, it was just more acceptance of, Marc and Steven being able to push aside all these problems and say, this is how I am, this is how I accept myself to be. Although he still has a lot of problems with, of course, you get the reveal of Jake Lockley also being inside. We knew this the entire time. He had, blackouts in the past few episodes, and I've been wondering if we were ever going to go back and see all these moments that we didn't get to see. One thing that was striking in the trailer was seeing, Oscar Isaac falling off that cliff, and in the first episode, you see him just already on the ground with his, chin all broken, and you never get to see him actually fall. You never get to see what happened when he landed. You don't get to see all these moments in episode 1 all the way through episode 6. There's even a moment in this episode where, Marc is possibly being down by Arthur Harrow, and he blacks out once again, and all of a sudden everybody around them is dead, and the only person that saw what happened is LAYLA, and she seemed pretty freaked out at what he had just done. And this has happened several times throughout the series, and we all knew that it was Jake Lockley, but the brutality of this character, especially in the post-credit scene when you see him, go over to this insane asylum where Harrow is now being kept, and it's kind of a role reversal type of thing, and he goes into this amazing white limousine that has the Spector as the license plate, which I really appreciate. Just the production design of all of this, and the costumes and all the clothing that Moon Knight wore, or Oscar Isaac wore, throughout the thing, being reminiscent of the whites of Moon Knight. And whether he was wearing a suit or a just normal hoodie or whatever he was doing, it always was so fitting with the character. And I love that he gets ushered into this limousine. He gets thrown in by Jake Lockley, and there is, of course, Khonshu is there. Of course, Khonshu didn't let him go. Of course, he was not just going to let his best avatar go and just go off on his life on his own. No, he has such a hold on Marc, and I think that's, I have seen some things from the comic, and in the comic they finally all together destroy Khonshu and get rid of Khonshu at the end of one comic arc, and I think that is where this character will go eventually way down the line in the series finale or whatever they end up doing with this character. We get to play around with Moon Knight for a little bit longer, but in the end I really think they're going to have to banish and destroy Khonshu in order to finally be free, and this perfectly sets up this conflict that he has inside his mind. This season really did focus on a lot of things. Of course, there was the main story arc of, you have Arthur Harrow trying to unleash Ammit and all this Egyptian mythology that is being explained and how it works in the MCU. Of course, all that stuff still exists, but the main focus of the show really was the conflict between Steven and Marc, and that was all resolved by the end of the season, which makes it very satisfying. Again, when they were fighting together, it was great, but again, he has so much problems because now he is dealing with this actual cold-blooded killer that also lives in his mind, who is being controlled by another psychopathic murderer being Khonshu. And so this conflict is still going to be inside of his mind for a season 2, and that is what I'm really excited about, because the arc that we got in this show and this season in particular is completed. It does feel like we got a full season, which I didn't think that they'll be able to wrap up everything in the season finale, but they somehow managed to do it in such a satisfying way. And of course, now you have so much more stuff that you can have inside the mind of Oscar Isaac's characters, and I just cannot wait to see that come into fruition. I loved Moon Knight's in general. I just love this entire show. The direction, the performances, of course, by Oscar Isaac and everybody else involved, the production design, the music is incredible as well. In terms of issues for this show in general, I think this show does struggle from just trying to figure out some way to edit this pacing. It's so fast paced. It almost feels like The Rise of Skywalker in some ways, where it's going so fast that it feels like just slow down for a minute, have some nice, emotional and tender moments between these characters, like you had in WandaVision, like you had in even Loki had some of those moments as well. But WandaVision mainly, it took a lot of time to slow down and live in a moment. And this show struggles to do that because it's going so fast through all these different story points, and there's 2 episodes where you didn't even see the real world, which was something which I think in terms of pacing, when you watch the show all together, it might struggle, especially episode 3, even though that was in the real world. That episode, kind of looking back in hindsight, was kind of weaker than all the other ones. But in general, I loved this show. Yes, there was some pacing and editing issues, but I think that was by design, because there's a lot of things about this story arc that we didn't get to see that I hope we get to actually see in later seasons. We go back and see what Jake did in this. What happened to the goldfish? That was still on my mind. Now there's suddenly 2 goldfish. Strange, very, very strange. But maybe we won't ever get to see that. Maybe that is by design. Maybe we won't get to see those for a reason. And quite frankly, in episode 1, I was like, oh, I can't wait to see all these things. But it did not matter, because this season was so just satisfying by the time it came to the last 2 and 3 episodes. I love this show. What did you guys think of it? Definitely comment down below. Any insight that you guys have, any things that you saw in the finale that you love, that you want to talk about. I'm very curious to hear all you guys' thoughts on the show as well. And like I said, I'll have reviews up for Doctor Strange and of course a ranking for all the MCU movies and shows together. So thanks guys for watching this video, and I hope to see you all in my next one.